Apamata's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Thank you for your support. There is a Donna box for contributions in the kitchen and also a link for contributions on the website.
Good morning to all. I'm Joel Barna. I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm not actually under this beautiful wintry moon background, but that's because I don't want you to see even the blurred version of the messy room that I'm sitting in right now. I'm using a pretty background. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted I get this opportunity to give a talk. I met two new folks earlier, Alec and Laura, who are there. Welcome. And I see someone that I've not seen before. Pardon me if you're a regular attendee and I've just missed you, but may I ask your name?
Charlie.
Jordan.
Charlie.
Okay, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Delighted that you're joining us today. And Joan, thank you for being the timekeeper, and Kim for being the doshi or practice leader. Jess, thank you for being the monitor today. It's it's a submersion in the Sangha for me to be able to join you. And I want to welcome the folks on the West Coast and the East Coast and elsewhere who are joining us today. I'm gonna share a koan from the book The Hidden Lamp that was actually read at one of Apamata's very active groups yesterday, the Women in Zen group. And they have been reading the book The Hidden Lamp, which is koans and other stories about women and Zen from the earliest days up through contemporary times. And then we'll have some breakout rooms. There'll be a chance for people to talk in groups. I'd say groups of two, to just process, do some thinking about and speaking aloud about this koan, and then we'll come back together to share that. So I'm going to read it out loud. And our practice at Apamata in dealing with koans is to read usually several people will read the koan, share the reading of it. And but the main thing of our practice is to imagine ourselves into the role of the people in the koan, so that it's not just a story of those people over there, but to imagine ourselves, in this case, as the student and as the teacher. So let me say, Maylie Scott, this is called Maylie Scott Meets Loneliness. Maylie Scott was a student of Sojun Mel Weitzman, one of the most important early Zen teachers, kind of second generation Zen teachers in the United States, who had been trained by a Japanese teacher and founded the Berkeley Zen Center, I believe, and has many students and has had a big influence. And he was one of the founders of the Zen Peace Fellowship. And Maylie Scott was a student of his. He ordained her and gave her Dharma transmission, and she began her own sitting groups. And she was a board member of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship for a long time. And she lived from 1939 to 2000, and I believe 11. So this is the koan as reported by the teacher Diane Musho Hamilton. And I'm going to read it 3 times, and I just listened the first time. The second time, imagine yourself, if you would, as the student. And the third time, imagine yourself as the teacher. And put yourself in those roles. Crying in despair, an earnest student asked her teacher, Seisho Maylie Scott, I've worked so hard to transform this crippling loneliness. I can neither shake it nor live with it. Can you help me? Holding the student in a steady gaze and offering her confident smile, Maylie ended the conversation with, please don't ever think anything is out of place. So nearly every word in this dialogue is important. And now I'm going to read it a second time, and please imagine yourself as the student. You're sitting in a small room, you're in Zazen posture, and you're meeting your teacher, whom you've probably known for some time. Crying in despair, an earnest student asked her teacher, Seisho Maylie Scott, I've worked so hard to transform this crippling loneliness. I can neither shake it nor live with it. Can you help me? Holding the student in a steady gaze and offering her confident smile, Maylie ended the conversation with, please don't ever think anything is out of place. And this time I invite you to be Maylie Scott. You have a role. You are wearing robes, probably. A student comes to you crying in despair, an earnest student, and she says, I've worked so hard to transform this crippling loneliness. I can neither shake it nor live with it. Can you help me? Holding the student in a steady gaze and offering a confident smile, Maylie ends the conversation with, please don't ever think anything is out of place. I'm going to actually stop sharing the screen here now. And I'm going to ask that we go into groups of 2. So does that work in the Zendo? Maybe not. Okay, good. Into groups of 2, and just share your reaction to this. And as a kind of a framing, I've got a couple of prompts that I'd like to share with you. But first, I want to give a little frame for it, that this dialogue between the teacher and the student reminds me a lot of a story that our teacher, Peg Syverson, has told many times. At her first meeting with her teacher, Joko Beck, in San Diego, California, when Peg had moved there to go to graduate school. She had a young son. She had recently lost her husband, and she was, of course, as a graduate student, struggling financially and struggling with how to meet the demands of her studies and caring for her son. And she came to Joko and she laid this distress out in some detail, mostly focusing on her thought that she was failing as a mother and that she didn't want that, and she really wanted to help. And Joko, as Peg has said many times, responded to her by saying, that's just a story, which Peg said, was like getting slapped or something. It didn't seem very sympathetic, but that over the course of a day or so, she began to realize that there was some truth in it, that by holding on to the story, particularly holding on to the emotion connected with the thought that she was feeling as a mother, that she was creating and continuing the conditions for her own distress. And that, yes, her life was, it had these events going on, and it had things going that were affecting her, but that it was also important for her to realize her own role in maintaining the suffering that she was feeling. And that was the beginning of her connection with Joko. And she tells a story, again, kind of surprising story, as a way of talking about, well, she's also talked about this kind of in the difference between therapy and Zen, or therapy and Buddhist practice. In therapy, as someone who has been a therapy client, I can imagine, and we have at least one therapist online with us. Maybe she will say something later on about this. But in therapy, I can imagine that the teacher or that the therapist might say something like, well, let's figure out ways in which you can connect with other people, like maybe volunteer at a soup kitchen or, do some things like that. Or at any rate, make things feel better. And what's going on here in the a Zen teacher by meeting a student expressing distress, that's not about feeling better. It's about making place for everything, even the bad feelings, like crushing loneliness, making space for that in your life. And that's hard work, of course. And that is something to do with uh, the difference between therapy and Zen, I think, which often comes up at Appamada, where there's a lot of talk about the language of therapy and how that can be used to illuminate aspects of our lives. Jess, I'm sorry I skipped over you. I was just looking at Rosemary online, and I hope you will talk about this as well later. But okay, so let's break up into groups of two. And Kim, if you could help everybody get set up in groups, I would suggest that you not break up into a group with the person that you came with. So that might be a better introduction for Appamada. And here's my prompt. What is it that the student is bringing forward? What is the teacher offering? What would you say different from what the teacher is offering? And and then finally the big question, what is missing from this dialogue? I have an answer to that I want to share later, or what I think is an answer to that question. But I would like you to think, what is missing? So, is that okay? Does that sound?
Would you read the koan once more?
One more time?
Yeah.
Would you
Okay,
read the koan?
Thank you. Yes. Crying in despair, an earnest student asked her teacher, Seisho Maylie Scott, I've worked so hard to transform this crippling loneliness. I can neither shake it nor live with it. Can you help me? Holding the student in a steady gaze and offering her confident smile, Maylie ended the conversation with, please don't ever think anything is out of place. Good. All right, so we're all back together?
Yes.
Well, very good. Well, anybody have thoughts that they would like to share from their small group discussion?
I can share. Thank you for encouraging me.
Speak
Yeah.
out loud.
Yeah.
I can hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can share. Thank you for encouraging me. I had this takeaway from the koan that it's about how we need to honor our desires and be grateful for our desires and understand them as aspirations. The Buddha didn't say that suffering is caused by desire. He said it's caused by craving. And I personally understand that to be an orientation towards desire, almost like a metacognitive attitude. You can get rid of the craving through acceptance, but what you're left with is the underlying desire, which is best understood as an aspiration or a value, and I think it's possible for us to, as the student, to imagine ourselves to be the student, to be grateful for and honor as a sacred aspiration our desire for human connection with others, even while simultaneously we don't have this aversion towards that aspiration not being met right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anyone online or also in the Zendo?
I'll just quickly say that what came to mind is a new reading group that I'm a part of where we're discussing spiritual bypass, and it seemed to me that the student was asking for a fix, which is the definition of spiritual bypass,
Mm.
and that's pretty common, I think. And so that was my immediate reaction as I was trying to set up breakout rooms. So
Thank you.
that's about as far as I'll go there.
Okay. Rosemary, and then I'm going to call on Evan after Rosemary.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for bringing this forward, Joel. I learned something from Lynn because in What Might I Have Done Differently, she offered that she might, that it would depend on the student. And then I thought that was such a brilliant, and natural, should be natural idea. And so she said, for example, I might hug the student and then I might say something like that Maylie Scott did.
Mhm.
But her message was it really depends on the student, which I thought was really so important. Yeah, I thought the teacher was really like these koans are really kind of tough love. You get hit over the head with something really important. Maybe not as a way of maybe how a teacher would actually be, but just to get us woken up to the idea of nothing, even the most painful things are out of place. And maybe impermanence too, although it wasn't specifically stated. So thank you. Beautiful, Joel. Thanks.
Thank you. Evan, would you, I was in the small breakout group with Evan and with Lisa, and Evan said something which reoriented me to the koan. So would you say that again?
Sure. Well, you'd suggested, or I guess the practice of putting yourself from the perspective of the different participants in the koan. And so when I was imagining myself as the teacher, I was sort of picturing this like suffering student in front of me in this room saying that she was lonely, and here we are in a room together, and I am doing my best as a teacher to be present and to bring all of my compassion to bear. And I just felt what she said, this please don't let, or I forget exactly how it was worded, but please don't think anything is ever out of place. Like that was, please don't think you're ever out of place. Like we are in the right place right now. And it struck me as a really compassionate thing that she was trying to communicate, even if it was framed maybe without the sort of sympathetic trappings that you might say to someone who expresses that kind of vulnerability. I don't know.
Thank you. I want to repeat something that I made a note of, that when we were in the small group, that you said you heard this, you were inhabiting the role of the teacher, and that in speaking those words, you melted. You felt a kind of a melting. And that really impressed me, that there was a way in which, you didn't melt, but the barrier melted, something like that you really were fully entering into the teacher's role. And I had already framed it as being like Joko Beck saying rather coolly, "Oh, that's just a story," and you turned that around for me. Thanks so much. So, Becky?
We did this one yesterday in Zen and Women. I'm going to read a little bit that I did then. If my first response was, if nothing is out of place, what in our language does out of kilter mean? So I think it means recognizing something rather than necessarily changing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that which arises in the now is in the perfect place to find our next Dharma gate adventures.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a bit, but I felt that there was compassion not there. And I think that compassion needs to be with us all the time. Like from the teacher didn't respond with any obvious compassion. I think it should be there all the time, even though it's not all that's there.
And we can't know that. This is just the story as reported. And
Yeah.
there's so many ambiguous things in it. Like it says, she ended the conversation saying, please don't ever think something is out of place. Anything is out of place. So maybe there was a long conversation that didn't get reported. Or maybe she was just shutting it down at that point when the student didn't get to say anything else, or she didn't say anything else. But after having heard Evan, I thought, oh, well, maybe there was the compassion that I'm missing.
Yeah.
That was there. And because of my conditioning, I'm reading myself into the situation and imagining that it wasn't there. So yeah, that's a great point, Becky. Thank you. I see Rosemarie's hand.
Just a quick note about the therapy versus the Zen teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jess, please chime in. We're really, generally speaking, not trying to make the patient feel better. We could just give them a pill if that were the case. We're really, it's a lot closer to this, maybe to what the teacher said, but it's really because this is what the patients want. They want to feel better in a shortcut versus processing, the why of things. So we're interested in where this is coming from and having them express as best they can what it actually is that they're going through. So it's a little bit different from the way you expressed it. So I just
I'm sorry. And I knew as I was saying it, it's like, oh, I'm only leaving out 99% of what needs to be said.
and not that we would never give suggestions. That happens at times.
Yeah.
But not the direction we typically.
But that in Zen, this has been certainly the case with therapists that I've consulted with, that their goal is to help me discover my resources and what I already have, strengths that I have, and that include fully meeting the difficulty that I'm in.
A lot more overlap.
Yeah, a lot more overlap. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lisa?
Something came up just now as we're talking about therapy versus Zen, which, there's some overlap sometime, and it has to do with resources and skill. And that's what came up for me yesterday, with imagining myself as the student is skills and resources. I wouldn't like to be stuck with this comment, everything is as it should be. That's always been, that's not the end of the conversation for me. I mean, you can keep expanding out and, examining what is it that is at it as it should be. So the koan is actually, you could say, it's missing a lot of context, which is something we address today. This could have been part of a larger conversation. We don't know. We don't know, what is the practice that this student and this teacher are engaged in. So it's not, okay, there's no fix. If spiritual bypassing, is looking for a fix, I'd like a broader view of that, because part of the fix, and fix is not a good word, it's like acceptance. So part of letting go of suffering is acceptance. But for me, that's never come by just willing myself to accept a terrific amount of pain. You know, I can't will myself to accept it. I mean, a lot of us come to Appamada with suffering. And so simply hearing, and if every conversation were ended with, hey, it's just, you know, this is the way it is, I don't think I would have stuck around.
Mm.
So, so part of what, you know, I love this practice, but it's the opportunity to continually expand my horizons and grow to the edge of my comfort level. But that's a huge arc. And that happens through practice with the many resources that we've been given, the many skills we get to practice with endlessly. So it's not a fix, but it's not only discovering resources within, it's developing those resources. You know, that's what the Sangha gives us, as well as the teacher. So that can be kind of a direction. We've had a lot of great conversations about this that really are opening up this koan for me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So I want to, oh, I see Joan's hand. And okay, Joan.
Thanks. Lisa, what Lisa's brought up was my discussion with Anne. Anne brought up the important idea of impermanence. That, yeah, you're lonely now, but everything's impermanent. And we also talked about then no self, that we tend to focus on ourselves, but we are part of something bigger. And those are all Zen teachings that enrich this consideration.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I have something, it kind of connects with what you were just saying and what Lisa mentioned before, you know, expanding what you're thinking about, that particularly in the grip of either intense physical pain or psychological pain, like grief, like loneliness, where we have a physiology that really doesn't want us to be alone and abandoned. I mean, we suffer the what makes it suffering is partially the reaction of our, you know, our bodies, the chemicals in our brain, the contractions of our muscles, all those things that come into place that tell us, get out of this situation. Get to where you're protected, get to where you're loved, you know, and you try and that doesn't work, and then that's extremely painful. But what occurs to me is missing is, and that I would have wanted to say if I were the teacher, is, are you alone? Are you alone in this suffering? Do other people suffer? Can you hold them in compassion also? So in the sense of meeting your own craving for oxytocin or whatever brain chemical is crying out to be supplied within your brain, yeah, you're stuck in this body with these feelings right now. But does it make a difference to remember that everyone in this life is going to experience old age and sickness and death and the loss of everyone they love and the breaking of important relationships and, you know, all the things that happen to us as human beings, which, as Anne and I were talking earlier, and it was like, yeah, and the pace of those experiences begins to accelerate the older you get. So you will have more opportunity to meet these, so does that, let me ask, does when I say, if I were the teacher and I said, are you alone? I would mean it in the sense of, are you alone in this suffering? Flint has talked about this many times in the past and has said I've seen him in practice, in practice discussion during a intensive, saying, is this your pain or is it the pain that we all share? Can you open yourself to realize that it is connecting you with other people, as awful as it feels? Does that make a difference? It does for me.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Tonglen
Mhm.
and how when I breathe out suffering and I breathe in everyone that feels that way.
Mm. That's it. I was in my conversation earlier with Anne, I was talking about my own very self-focused version of Tonglen that I have used in the past, which begins by just like, okay, I'm breathing in this feeling that I don't want, and it can be as hot as it has to be, as oppressive as it has to be while I breathe in. And then I breathe it out, not trying to change anything, but just making a cool space around it. Do that over and over again. And that only after really absorbing that can I begin to even think of connecting with other people and doing what you're describing, Kathy. The breathe in my own thing that I'm focused on and breathe out in connection with others, which is a perfect way of saying it too. I see Kim's hand.
I just wanted to say what you were talking about sounds just like the mustard seed story.
I know two mustard seed stories. Which one is this one?
The one where the woman has a baby who has died and she takes it to the Buddha. And
Okay.
he sends her to find a house where there's been no death
Right.
to get a mustard seed. And actually, we're going to be talking about that story in our spiritual bypassing group.
Yeah, the Buddhist teaching really comes down to the truth of our human condition, that if we're happy, the happiness won't last. If we're if we are mistakenly thinking that we can force conditions to allow us to avoid suffering, that will only cause more suffering. And there is a path, but the path involves honest recognition of these two facts first thing, and then to the lowering of the separation, as in the famous story of Kisa Gotami, who comes to the Buddha with her dead child and says, please bring him back to life. And the Buddha says, bring me a mustard seed from a house that has never experienced death, and I'll see what I can do. And she comes back and she says, I realize now that I'm connected to all these other people. Thank you.